A lone rider cuts across the horizon, the dying sun painting the sky in blood red and gold. Dust rises with every strike of hooves, curling in the twilight air like smoke from a battlefield. He does not speak. He does not stop. All that follows is silence, save for the echo of his horse's rhythm and the whisper of the wind carrying a name that is never shouted, only breathed in hushed awe and trembling fear. In saloons thick with cigar smoke, old men lean closer and mutter his story. Around crackling campfires, cowhands tell his tale to restless drifters. Even in the dark corners of outlaw hideouts, his shadow is mentioned with a shiver. Some swear he's a ghost, a spirit of vengeance riding the plains to haunt those who prey on the weak. Others insist he's flesh and blood, a man scarred too deeply to ever show his face again. The mask, that black strip of cloth that conceals his eyes. To most, it is nothing more than disguise. But to those who've seen him, who felt the cold weight of his judgment, the mask is something far more. It is a symbol, a reminder that justice wears no badge in this lawless frontier, it wears only shadows. They say he comes without warning. One moment, the town is choking under fear, the next, a rider appears at the edge of the street. His silver horse gleams like lightning against the dust. His revolver glints, heavy with mercy, but aimed with certainty. He never lingers, never boasts. When the dust settles, when freedom is restored, he is already gone. Is he a man? Is he a myth? Or something caught in between? All anyone knows for certain is this: wherever evil rides, so does he. The story begins not in glory, but in betrayal. The Texas sun bore down hard on the canyon trail, its heat bouncing off jagged rock walls that rose like the jaws of a trap. 6 men rode that day, the Texas Rangers, sworn to uphold law in a land that barely recognized it. Among them was a young man, idealistic, his heart bound to justice like iron to fire. He rode beside his brother, Captain Dan Reed, unaware that each hoofbeat carried them deeper into the valley of death. Above the cliffs, eyes watched. Rifles gleamed. Outlaws, led by the ruthless Butch Cavendish, had chosen their ground with care. The canyon was narrow, unforgiving, a place where echoes could carry a dying man's cry for miles without ever finding ears to save him. And then it began. The first shot cracked the silence like lightning. Horses reared, screams filled the air, and chaos thundered through the canyon. Rangers fell one by one, bullets tearing through leather and flesh. Dust choked the sunlight, turning day into a storm of death. In minutes, the proud lawmen were reduced to stillness, their blood soaking into the unforgiving earth. When the gunfire ceased, only the echoes remained, and the buzz of circling vultures. But not all were dead. Beneath a mound of bodies, gravely wounded, a single man stirred. His breath rattled, shallow and broken, yet stubbornly present. He crawled through the dust, fingers clawing at the earth, dragging his shattered body toward life. Hours passed, the sun sinking into a cruel night. He should have died there, alongside his brothers. But fate had other plans. It was then that a shadow appeared, not of death, but of salvation. Tonto, a wandering Comanche, found the broken ranger lying half-buried in dust and blood. Where others might have left him, Tonto saw a flicker of spirit refusing to die. He carried him to a hidden shelter, tended his wounds with herbs and patience, and watched over him through fevered nights. Slowly, painfully, the ranger's strength returned. His body healed, but his heart, his soul, were carved hollow by what had been lost. When he could finally stand again, the young ranger returned to that canyon of bones. With his own hands, he dug graves for the fallen. For his brother. For his comrades. One by one, he laid them to rest beneath the stones, each burial a vow hammered deeper into his chest. And when he came to his brother, the captain, he did something no outlaw could have foreseen. From his brother's vest, he cut a strip of black cloth. He tied it across his eyes, the cloth dampened with both sweat and tears. It was no disguise. It was mourning, a mask of grief that would soon become a symbol. That day, the man who had been a ranger died alongside his brothers. In his place rose something else. A shadow, the myth. A man who would never again ride with a company, never again wear the star of the law. From that day forward, he would be alone. The vow was simple but absolute. He would be one man against the tide of lawlessness. Not for glory, not for recognition, but for those who could not protect themselves. Yet with this vow came torment. Survivor's guilt clawed at him, whispering that he had lived when worthier men had fallen. Every outlaw he hunted carried the faces of those he had lost. And the mask he wore, it shielded him, yes, but it also imprisoned him. He could no longer be simply a man. He had become a symbol, bound to a life of shadows. It was not he who chose the name. Around campfires and in the whispers of grateful townsfolk, it began to spread. The Lone Ranger, a title born from rumor and awe, passed along like scripture. He never claimed it. He never sought it. But he carried it, because legends do not ask for permission. They are written by the people who need them. And so the Lone Ranger rode on, haunted and unyielding, a solitary figure against a land drowning in chaos. His past lay buried in that canyon graveyard. His future stretched endlessly across the horizon, stitched together by vengeance, justice, and a silence that no bullet could ever shatter. The man who had been left for dead in the canyon was no longer just a survivor. He was reborn into something the world did not yet understand, a figure caught between man and myth. But rebirth needed a code, and the Lone Ranger forged one from pain, loss, and the fragile hope that justice could still exist in a land drowning in blood. The first vow he made after crawling from that canyon was ironclad. He would never kill if he could help it. Not because his enemies deserved mercy, but because vengeance was a poison that consumed the soul. He had seen it in the eyes of outlaws, in the smirk of killers who left families broken in the dust. If he became like them, he was no better. His revolvers carried silver bullets, rare, costly, shining. Each one was a symbol, a reminder that life was precious and that taking it should never be easy. Silver was purity, restraint, balance. When his six-shooter glinted in the sun, outlaws knew this was no ordinary gunman. They were facing a man who fought with something stronger than rage. At his side rode Tonto, the Comanche warrior who had dragged him from the dirt when death was only a breath away. Their bond was not of master and servant, nor of unequal allies. It was a brotherhood forged in silence and blood. Tonto had lost his people to betrayal and greed. The Ranger had lost his family to bullets and fire. Together, they carried scars the world could not see. Tonto grounded him, speaking when the Ranger's silence grew too heavy, warning him when the mask threatened to consume the man beneath it. And when the Ranger faltered, when rage threatened to break his vow, it was Tonto who pulled him back from the edge. The legend did not begin with grand speeches or banners. It began with quiet, desperate acts of justice. A town strangled by a gang of cutthroats woke one morning to find their captors bound in ropes, their leader dragged to the sheriff's door. A family taken hostage by raiders saw a masked rider crash through their door, bullets sparking against the walls, until freedom tasted like air again. He struck like a storm and vanished like smoke, never waiting for thanks, never claiming reward. Every mission left whispers in his wake. Children told each other stories of the masked rider who came when you were most afraid. Drifters swore they'd seen a man who could ride faster than the wind, who shot bullets that shone like starlight. Outlaws cursed his name, saying he could not be killed because he was already a ghost. But a man does not become a legend by deeds alone. Symbols carried him beyond flesh and bone. His mask, stitched from the vest of his fallen brother, was more than concealment. It was mourning, an oath to never forget the canyon's grave. His steed, a brilliant white horse named Silver, thundered across the plains like justice made flesh. When that white flash appeared on the horizon, hope followed. The Ranger never lingered. He never allowed towns to grow too familiar with him. He would arrive when needed, restore balance, and then fade back into the wilderness. The absence of his presence became part of the myth. To the people, he was not a man to be thanked but a force, justice that came from nowhere and disappeared into the dust. With each mission, the mask grew heavier. Behind it was a man still haunted by guilt, a man who had once had a name, a family, a place in the world. But the world did not want that man anymore. It wanted the Lone Ranger. And so he let the mask take him, step by step, until even he wondered if he was still the survivor who crawled from the canyon, or if he had become nothing more than the story people told in the dark. Yet in every act of mercy, every outlaw captured alive, every child freed from terror, he found a reason to keep writing. He was not justice perfected. He was justice struggling, bleeding, rising again with every sunrise. The Lone Ranger was not born from triumph. He was born from loss, from silence, from a grave in a canyon. And in that emptiness, he became something no outlaw bullet could ever truly kill, a legend. Whispers always came first. In the dark corners of saloons, between gulps of whiskey and the shuffle of cards, voices would lower as if afraid the very mention of his name might summon him. Farmers fixing fences, mothers rocking their children, even drifters passing through towns would speak of him in half belief, half fear. The masked rider, they said, the one who leaves silver bullets where the deadliest outlaws used to stand. The Lone Ranger. Long before he arrived, the air in a town seemed to change. A hush fell over streets. Hope flickered in the eyes of the desperate. Outlaws, hardened by years of blood and lawlessness, would check their pistols twice, their hands suddenly less steady. For even before the dust cloud on the horizon, the legend of the Lone Ranger rode faster than his horse. The silver bullet was not just ammunition, it was a signature, a warning, and a symbol. After every encounter, one would gleam in the dirt, shimmering in the sunlight like a relic. To townsfolk, it meant justice had come and gone like a storm, restoring order with a swiftness the law could not. To criminals, it meant their time had run out. Outlaws who once laughed at the mention of him began to flinch at the sight of silver. They whispered that each bullet carried the weight of a life spared, and that the Ranger never wasted one unless it was meant to teach a lesson. For some gangs, a single bullet left lodged in the saloon wall was enough to scatter them across the desert like frightened crows. The stories spread like wildfire, each retelling making him larger than life. One tale spoke of him dismantling a gang that had taken over a small ranching town. Alone, masked, he walked into the lion's den, outnumbered 10-1, and yet by sundown, the sheriff's badge was returned to rightful hands. Another story told of him riding for 3 days without rest to rescue a kidnapped family from Comanchero slavers, appearing like a ghost at dawn, his revolver flashing in the half-light. And then there were the battles against corruption. Not every villain wore spurs and carried 6-shooters. Sometimes they wore badges. The Lone Ranger was said to have faced down sheriffs who sold justice to the highest bidder, breaking their stranglehold on frontier towns. To stand against the law itself, and win, cemented him not as an outlaw, but as the one true justice in a land where justice had none. Yet the bigger the legend grew, the murkier the truth became. Some swore he was one man. Others insisted he was many, a brotherhood of masked riders keeping the myth alive by sharing the same identity. His name carried weight like thunder across the plains, but few could say they had seen him clearly, and fewer still could claim to know his true face. The mask blurred the line between man and ghost. Was he flesh and blood, or something more? Was he a lone survivor, or a spirit bound to the desert winds, riding forever where injustice festered? The frontier had no answers, and so the myth grew taller than the mesas and stronger than the rivers that carved them. People swore he appeared only when all hope seemed lost. A town under siege would wake one morning to find a masked man on a white horse at the edge of the street. He never announced himself. He never asked for thanks. By the time the outlaws were scattered or shackled, he would vanish into the horizon. Like dawn itself, one preacher said, "You never see it arrive. You only realize it when the darkness is gone." Others swore that he never ate, never slept, never rested. That he could ride 100 miles in a day and still appear at the perfect moment. He became more than human in their eyes, a phantom draped in flesh. A spirit who chose to wear a mask, not because he feared being known, but because mortals could not look upon justice itself. The truth, of course, was simpler, but no less powerful. For the innocent, the Lone Ranger was salvation, proof that good men could still exist in a world gone mad. He gave them something to believe in, a reason to endure another day. His mask, his horse, his silver bullets were more than tools. They were hope forged into symbols. For the guilty, he was inevitability. The mask stripped him of identity, making him untouchable, unkillable in their minds. He was not a man to be hunted down. He was a storm to be endured. Outlaws, no matter how bold, carried an unspoken dread. What if tonight, it's me? What if that silver bullet is already meant for me? Fear spread faster than bullets. Justice became psychological warfare. Even before the Lone Ranger fired a shot, the myth itself had already disarmed his enemies. And so, long before death would ever claim him, the Lone Ranger became immortal. A man who had once been broken, left for dead in a canyon ambush, now lived forever in whispers, stories, and the trembling of men who had everything to fear. He was not bound by law, nor by the frailty of human reputation. He was bound only by a code, and by the mask that made him more than mortal. To the innocent he was salvation. To the guilty he was doom. To history he was a myth written in dust, silver, and silence. And myths do not die. As the dust of the frontier begins to settle, one truth becomes impossible to ignore. The Lone Ranger is more than a man. The figure who once bled, who once crawled through the dirt of a canyon ambush, begins to vanish beneath the mask. The human scars, the grief, the loneliness, these fade into shadow. What remains is a legend, a phantom of justice riding eternal, faceless, timeless. But that legend leaves behind a haunting question. Was the Lone Ranger truly seeking justice, or simply fleeing the weight of grief he could never put down? Was every outlaw stopped, every family saved, an act of duty? Or was it a desperate attempt to fill the hollow left by brothers buried in shallow graves? Did he live for the people he protected, or was he already gone the moment he tore fabric from his brother's vest and hid his face from the world? The mask itself tells a story no one dares say aloud. To the frightened, it's the mask of salvation. To the wicked, it's the mask of doom. But to the man wearing it, it may have been a prison, holding back a soul forever trapped between life and memory. And yet, no matter the truth, the Lone Ranger became exactly what the West needed. A symbol that justice could still ride where the law could not. Perhaps it didn't matter who he truly was, only that he was. The story closes as it began, the horizon ablaze with a dying sun, a lone rider cutting through the glow of dusk. His white stallion charges forward, silver hooves pounding against the earth. The mask gleams against the fire in the sky, half man, half ghost. No one can say where he came from or where he's going. They only know this: wherever evil rides, so does he. Now, I'll leave you with a question. Do you believe the Lone Ranger was truly a man of flesh and bone, or was he a myth born from the desperate prayers of a people abandoned by law and order? A legend justice itself created? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you want to ride deeper into the myths, legends, and cinematic shadows of the Wild West, subscribe and join us, because the next story is already waiting on the horizon.